Wrath of God. When we say wrath of God, we may question, God is a loving God. Why would he have anger and wrath? The word wrath means extreme anger. But God is not just a loving God, but also a God of justice. That means, although he loves you, he will bring justice and punishment upon you when it's necessary. We confuse wrath of humans with wrath of God. Human anger is motivated by selfish reasons and desires for revenge. But God's wrath is completely righteous in character. If you ask any Christian what you are being saved from, they'll just say from sin, hell, life of misery, depression, and all that. And although that's true, theologically speaking, God's wrath is what we are being saved from. Salvation is deliverance from sin and hell. But what is hell? It's a punishment from God, motivated from his wrath. Because God is a just God, when we sin, he must punish. So, why are we under God's wrath? And how can I fix it? Well, there are 3 reasons why we are under God's wrath. 1. Rejection of God revealed in creation. Romans chapter 1 verse 18 says this: The wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the goodnesses and wickedness of people, who suppress the truth by their wickedness. For what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. This verse says that creation declares that God is real, but we reject it and try to explain creation through science. From step 1, there are 2 ways you can know God exists. First is creation. There's beauty, there's order, and there's harmony in everything. But we are slow to recognize that this is our Creator God, and we think that science can explain it. Second is conscience. Let's take neuroscience. It's one of the most complex and toughest field of science out there. And any scientist can tell you that they do not understand the brain. Mind and intellect, where does it come from? Consciousness is an aspect that evolution has no explanation for. But we all have it. But when we doubt and demand and question God's existence, it's ironic, since God gave us the ability to question, doubt, and demand. Number 2, replacement of God with creation. Romans chapter 1 verse 22 says this: Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools in exchange to the glory of the immortal God for images to look like mortal men and animals and reptiles, so God gave them over to sinful desires. Every disobedience and rebellion against God, we exchange the truth of God for the lie of idolatry, and then resulting us into thinking that it will satisfy what God can't. So, ask yourself, what have you been replacing God with? Success, relationships, your goals, or your ambitions? Imagine a story where there's a boy who wants a bicycle for Christmas, and he prays to God about it. Let's imagine his prayer is him promising that he will go good for an entire month. But he thinks 1 month is a really long time. He prays again and shortens it to a week. He still thinks a week is a really long time. So let's say he shortens the prayer, saying that he will go good for only a day. Obviously, something's not going to be right in his heart. Let's say he goes to his church secretly and he steals a crucifix. He seals it in his closet and prays, If you ever want to see your cross again, give me a bicycle. You might laugh at him, but spiritually, we have been doing that constantly, always compromising God with desires. So how can I stop replacing God though? It's simple, really. Set apart time for him and put in the thought for him. Desire and prioritize him. Simple temptations can lead to habitual sins. Next time, put away your phone. Put it somewhere that's not in your area, and start setting apart time for God instead. Also, ask yourself, what have you been compromising and desiring with creation rather than the Creator itself? Number 3, we rebel against God's creative order. Romans chapter 1 verse 24 says this: Therefore, God gave them over to the sinful desires of their hearts, the sexual impurity, for the degrading of their bodies with one another. Then let's get to verse 27. And the men likewise gave up with natural relationships with women, and were consumed with passion for one another, men committing shameless acts with men and receiving in themselves the due penalty for their error. These verses explain the foreseeing of homosexuality, which is against God's order. Now, what does it mean when we says God gave them over in verse 24? Well, think about this. When you sin, there's probably going to be a moment where you think you got away with it. and there is no penalty. But that's what you think, because that's a curse. There's two results from this scenario. Either it's coming, or God gave you over to the sin, which means He will wait until you're completely destroyed. So, how do we rebel against God's creative order? When God created everything, He established orders, rules, and principles, and by how we must live. In a family, there's a mother, a father, and there are children. But when it's changed, it will destroy you. If you break God's law, there will be punishment. Any relationship you go against God's law, your spirit will be immensely damaged. Let's take Solomon for example. His life as king meant the golden age for Israel. He even went as far as building a gold-covered house for God. However, this came to an end when Solomon broke God's law. By having foreign wives from Egypt, he slowly started worshipping and building temples for an idol instead, and he ended up turning away from God. So do not be lustful in your life. It can severely damage you. And be sensitive around the world as well. You will be exposed with lies that will try to normalize things back to look okay. When Paul is talking about the wrath of God, he's talking to us directly. It's not just about the little things you did as a sin, but the biggest recognition that you have to have about your sin is your rejection of God. The first step of salvation is recognizing and repenting about your sin. Then you need to have faith for Him and being dependent to Him. Lie is not the most offending sin to Him. What's so offensive to Him is when you live independently without Him. God is most wrathful to us because of our thinking that the cross is insignificant and has nothing to do with our lives. I hope you found this useful, and Jesus loves you.